welcome back to the TEENSTAKE podcast. If you're new here, this is the podcast where I give my perspective or my take on business, film, culture, and life in general, the best way I know how. Before we move on to the first section of this podcast, there's going to be a short video on the channel and also posted on Spotify on very important updates that will be happening starting in the next episode. And you just listen to the video to figure out what those updates are. So, quite a big change, and I wanted to make a separate video about it so that I don't take the time for this intro. Anyway, today we'll just be diving into habits again, but specifically in each of those sections. So if you get value out of this, like, subscribe, share, follow both on Instagram and YouTube and Spotify. Without further ado, let us move on first to the Culture Corner. Today in the Culture Corner, we will be discussing habits, but specifically habits within peer groups. What I mean by habits within peer groups is if you're within a group of people, there's a certain way people tend to act, some certain characteristics that they have that you and that group of people might pick up as a habit. So I'd say the definition of that would be being in a group and sustaining a continuous amount of habitual practice over a certain amount of time. That's the way I would define it. So, first thing is positive peer influence. Positive peer influence is when you're within a group of people and you push each other to do good. The best example I can give of this is maybe a debate group where you have friends or peers where you meet once in a while or once a week or however often, and you discuss things, break them down, and then debate against each other, form teams and all that. That's positive peer influence. Another one is maybe a band where you push each other to learn new skills, to practice that song, to perform and all that. Third example is maybe a book reading club where you push each other to read books, maybe set deadlines, get different kinds of books and discuss them. That is positive peer influence. And the second is negative peer influence. I think the way to plainly describe this is when you're in a group of people and the normalcy within the group tends to be a sense of unproductivity or boredom. There are many different extremes that negative peer pressure and negative peer groups can get you to, and we'll not discuss this here or now. But in general, I think just any group that pushes you to do something that either you don't want to do or something that's just not right is negative peer influence, pushing you collectively as a group to do something negative. But how do you manage this peer influence? I feel like the first thing when managing peer influence, especially as a young person or as a person in general, is to learn to say no to certain things. That will require you to be quite confident in who you are. So I'd say saying no to a lot of things will really help you. And second, not feeling bad for saying no. Because most of us say no to some things, but then we regret saying no because maybe the group had fun or what you were expecting to happen didn't happen. But sometimes it's really not worth the risk. So I'd say no, and then don't 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 be concerned or think about, oh, I regret saying no or anything like that. say no and don't regret it. I think one more point to make will be uh, how to stay in uh, a positive peer group. I feel like this will require boldness because, for example, in the situation in which you might be in what you could consider a negative peer group, you can be the positive change. You can raise your voice and say, guys, something is wrong here. We need to change A, B, C, and D. And for this group to be able to operate in a more productive manner. And if your voice is not heard and you try and try and try, then maybe that group just isn't meant for you. Maybe you've just reached the end of the line in regards to that specific circle of friends or peers, schoolmates, churchmates, whoever it may be. Um, if things are going negatively, or when you meet and you just don't do anything productive whatsoever, um, and you feel bad about it, maybe you're not supposed to stay in that group forever. But that's just my thoughts on this. I think in conclusion, I feel like peer groups tend to influence a lot on our habits and behavior. The saying goes, you're the average of the five closest people to you. And I believe that you determine who those five people are. This is outside of family, this is outside of your parents, siblings, your parents, your siblings, your aunties, uncles, cousins. Outside of that, your five closest friends, you're the average of your five closest friends. And I think that's actually a very good way to measure things because if you really, really think about it, you you take a lot from the people around you. That's just human nature. So I'd say the people you surround yourself with is quite important for leading a good life. And if you find that your life socially is not the way you want it to be, I believe you can change that. Find a new closest five people to you. And I believe that it will cultivate a better life for you to live. And that's all I will say about that. Now, moving on to the business buzz section. Hello, and welcome to the business buzz section of this podcast. And today we shall be discussing habits, but specifically in marketing. Don't worry, it'll make sense eventually. Habitual marketing or marketing with habits is something that's often, I don't even think, talked about or even heard of. But what would you describe as a habit in marketing? I'd say it's just the consistent repetition of a certain thing you do within your company. So I'm going to give 4 points. First one being consistency in branding. If you take brands like Coca-Cola, or Nike or Adidas, Disney, Tesla, those are very, very consistent brands. Ever since the 1920s, the Disney logo has been the same even now in 2024. Ever since Nike was founded, that tick has just been it. Same as Adidas, Coca-Cola. The most extreme changes these companies go through is maybe changing the color, but the brand still sticks. The font that Coca-Cola has is noticeable from a mile away. You can tell that's Coca-Cola. And consistency in branding, I feel, is very important, especially if you plan for your business to be um, a business that thrives for a long time, even 30, 40 years. And as an example, the Disney brand has been alive for now 101 years. Um, you want it to be consistent. So consistency in branding, making it a habit to whatever changes we make to our product or service, we have to keep the brand as consistent as possible so that both your old and new market can be able to relate to the same product. Second is marketing automation. So, marketing automation, I think, in the most plain sense, again, is just making things easier. So, certain tools that are easily made available for you to be able to boost your marketing campaigns. And this automation can also help with reaching new audiences. There's two kinds of automation, in my opinion. There's what I could call strict automation, where we take the word automation quite literally, where you have a certain set of algorithms or tools that upload your stuff and push it to different people. Then the second kind of automation I'd say for me is um, expansion into new spaces. I'd say automation is almost like a refresh. So in this case, it will be a comparison between email marketing, marketing through emails, getting addresses, sending updates once a week or twice a week, versus social media marketing, where you pay a certain amount of money and Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or whatever other social platforms you use will push that advertisement to multiple people. That's more automated than email marketing, where you write the email, send to your address list and all that. The social media marketing is the more automated version of this, where you just put your ad up and then the company you paid just does its thing, pushing it everywhere. The third thing I feel like businesses should make a habit of doing is tracking customer habits. If you have a product you're making or a service you're offering, when you're doing your market research, the first thing you should find is who's my target market, and then secondly, how do they act? So you have to analyze that and then decide how you can influence now your customers' habits. I think consumer products do this the simplest. For example, fast food. One way you can influence your customers is pricing, the taste of the food as well, the kind of food you make, what what habit does that put in the customer? Retention, coming back for the same product over and over and over again. You find in some cases, if you have a favorite restaurant, favorite place to go for fast food, chances are you've taken the same meal from there over 20 times. So the company has succeeded in making a habit of you going there, and in them improving on the quality of their meal, they've also given you the habit of picking the same thing over and over and over. It's just the same way your family could have a certain brand of rice that they buy, or a certain brand of sugar or flour that they buy. That is, it's not that the other brands are irrelevant, it's just that you've had a habit of picking up that one. You don't even look at the price anymore, you just know that one is good, let's pick it. That's the company succeeding at building a habit within the customer's mind. And I feel that's something very important for our businesses to do, regardless of whether you're in textile business or corporate business. You need customers, but customer retention comes from building a habit within your customer to be able to come in and out of your product space or service space. And I think last point is a sense of transparency with your customers. I think that is a habit that companies should build, because here in, I think, the Kenyan business space, the term that I would use is almost like gatekeeping, but really not. Whereas when something is wrong, there's a lot of barriers you'll have to break to be able to get the person to admit that something is wrong within their system. Um, and I feel like we need to have a habit of being transparent with our customers. If our customer has a complaint about something, the first thing you should be thinking about is not defending yourself to say, no, the problem is not that. The first thing you should be thinking about is, if I lose this customer, chances are you don't know how many people that person knows. They could be bringing you new connections or taking customers away from you. So, first thing is always think about customer retention, and that's where transparency comes in. With transparency, you can be able to talk to the person and identify the issues and tell them the truth. Basically, you're not telling them everything about the way your business runs and all that. You're just telling them, okay, this is the issue, and yes, we're in the process of solving it. Sorry for the inconvenience. We will take care of it. Instead of saying, no, I think the issue is this and this and that, it's on your side. I don't think our business has an issue. You don't blame the customer, because at the end of the day, you're the provider, they're the consumer, and consumers sustain the producer market. And I think that is the last point I will make on habits. I think, in conclusion, the importance of marketing as a habit is, I think the importance of marketing as a habit is being able to retain customers at the end of the day. I feel marketing is not, it's partly getting customers, but the hardest part is keeping them. And I feel like building these small habits, transparency and consistency in branding, and putting a habit in your customer to come back time and time again, are very important things that companies can take out of to be able to grow their businesses and sustain them over a long time. And that is the last thing I will say about that. And now moving on to the life lesson segment. Welcome to the life lesson segment of this podcast. Today we shall be discussing productivity and habits. So, a few episodes back, I discussed self-esteem and building confidence, but I feel like one of the things that contributes the most to personal growth is productive habits. Certain things you put in place in your life on the daily, on the weekly, on the monthly, that will be able to help you grow as a person in whatever area in life you're planning to grow in. So I think first we can start with defining what a productive habit is. I think for me personally, a productive habit is, first of all, a habit that just makes you think and do. So making your bed is a productive habit, as little as it seems. Cleaning up is a productive habit. Reading is a productive habit. Just anything that challenges your mind in a positive way. And as discussed briefly in the previous episode, one thing that helps with keeping these things in track is habit stacking, where you put one thing on top of the other to build a good frame in which your life operates. And some examples of productive habits, other than the ones I've already mentioned, are study timing, where you set a specific time for you to be able to do your work and get things done. Exercise, which is a very commonly stated productive habit, where you push not only your mind but your body. And I'll use myself as an example. On May 8th, I started boxing, and it has been tough. And I'll share more on that as a challenge when I get to my another point on discipline. But it has been extremely tough, but I've made it a habit. Show up, do the work, come back, journal it, track it, record it, and all that. Those are habits that I've built out of a simple, well, I won't say simple, but out of a regular occurring task. So another thing that I've been doing quite regularly, actually every day, is languages. So I'm currently in the process of mainly learning Japanese and Korean, and I have been learning Japanese for 100 days now, and I have been learning Korean for around a month. And that is not easy, but I've made a habit of showing up every day and writing my notes on the languages, using the study resources that I have, and all that. And that adds to a productive day. And I feel the best way to now come into my next point, which is overcoming challenges in terms of productivity and habits. The best way is to set 3 goals a day. So I got this structure from um YouTuber and Instagrammer that I follow. Will link his channel and Instagram down below, and it's quite interesting. The 3 wins every day, 3 wins. So there's the physical win, there's the mental win, and there's the spiritual win. Physical win, I ran 5 miles today. Mental win, I did my mathematics. Spiritual win, I read a chapter of the Bible today, or I prayed or meditated, whatever it may be. That structure alone, doing it consistently like I have been, it really gives you so much joy at the end of the day. When you're done, even if you feel like the day was unproductive, you can look back on those 3 things and tell yourself, I did it. I completed something. And I feel for me, it just makes you feel good. Um, so that brings me to my, I think, last point, which will be discipline. Discipline is something that I have talked about and will continue to talk about because it is quite important. Last time I talked about it extensively is when I was comparing discipline to motivation, and how discipline is greater than motivation, because motivation means that there's an external source guiding you to do a certain thing. That's motivation, whereas discipline is doing the thing whether or not you feel like it, whether or not this is a good time, despite your condition or how you feel. Just doing the thing because it has to be done. Which now brings me back to boxing. So I started boxing May 8th, and it is tough. And coming now to where I am now, I can see compared to day one, progress has been happening. There's some lifestyle changes I had to make concerning my dieting, how much work I'm putting in, the times I'm waking up, how I'm spacing my school. All this is just based off discipline. One thing came into my life, and then I had to change my entire schedule. So boxing came in, and I had to change a lot of things. And then to add to now to what makes it discipline more than a habit is, to be honest, most habits that we set for ourselves are relatively, in terms of mental energy, really easy to do. We just don't like doing them. So 3 weeks ago, I decided personally for myself to make things easier. So I leave the house at just a few minutes before 6 o'clock. I used to walk there. It's around 2 to 3 kilometers. I'd walk there, reach the gym at around 6:25, but that was taking a lot of time. So I decided I'm going to start running. So first 3 4 days it was tough to run because there's a lot of incline decline on the way to the gym. But I decided it saves me time, and time is, I think, for me, my most valuable resource is time. So I just decided to start running. So now 3 weeks later, it's used to be a 25-minute walk. Now it's an 8 to 10 minute run. I do my stuff, I run back before the sun comes out, and I have saved myself close to an hour of time just because I made one simple decision, one tough decision, because running is not easy. And keep in mind, you're carrying a bag on your back full of your equipment and stuff, and then you've just gone, you've boxed for an hour and a half, you've done training, and then you have to run back with that same bag, but with twice the tiredness you had when you were running there in the morning. So I feel like the role of discipline with building habits is quite important and often undermined or ignored intentionally because we all know what we need to do. When you say your life is chaotic or not going well, we all know what needs to change. If you feel like you're getting a bit heavier, you know that might be either how much or how little you exercise or how much or how little you eat. You know if you're not doing well in your studies, that's either how much or how little you study or how much time you take to do so. So, where discipline comes in is we all know what we need to do, how to do it, and chances are 90% of the time we have all the time and all the resources to do so. We just choose not to do it. So, a quote from Mike Tyson is discipline is doing what you don't like to do, but doing it like you love it. That is what discipline is, because once you break that barrier of, I don't like doing this thing, I'm still gonna do it anyway, and then it starts to become a habit, some of these things actually become fun. Because the first 2 weeks of boxing, again, I'll use that as an example again, the first 2 weeks were quite tough. I'd come back home and my legs were shaking because, you're skipping, you're running, you're doing cardio, you're boxing on the pads, you're boxing on the bag, you're doing weights. My body will just be shaking. But now, after progress has happened, and now my body is getting used to some of the very intense exercises that we tend to do. It could have been very easy for me personally on the second week to just say, I don't think this is worth it, and I'll just do exercise from home. But then what? Then you just give up. I saw a very interesting thing the other day. A winner is just a loser who tried again. So I feel like we all want to win, but there's certain steps we need to take to be able to achieve that winning. And when you lose, when you feel tired, exhausted, stressed, the best thing you can do for yourself is to try again. And that's the importance and the very, very definable difference between discipline and motivation. Motivation is doing something because you feel like, and discipline is doing something because you have to. You can quote me on that from experience. So, in conclusion, when building productive habits, you need to first know what you need to do and how you need to do it. Allocate time for certain things. Know what kind of habits you need to build. And I think one thing to add before we close this section is purpose. When you're building a certain habit, especially if it's skill related, I'll use the example of my art. For the longest time, I never really wanted to do art, but then I got into it last year and started drawing every day and or often stopped for like 4 months, came back to it in October. Time went by, and then in December last year I participated in a challenge on Instagram, and it was quite amazing. I feel like my art skyrocketed from there. And then fast forward to around 2 months ago, and I asked myself a very interesting question. Why? The question I asked was why? Why am I drawing? Why do I want to create? What is the purpose of me putting in this much work and effort if it was for nothing? And then it struck me that I really did not have a purpose for my art. Drawing whatever I wanted to, it really had no direction. So if you're building a productive habit that's based on a skill that you're trying to build, it has to be with purpose. Like I'm learning Japanese and Korean because I might look for a job opportunity there, and I'd prefer it if I can already speak the languages. I am learning art right now because I'd want to be an animator and character designer to be able to visually represent the stories that I write. So, the key point out of all of this that you should take is discipline is quite important in every area of your life, whether it's commitment to a goal, commitment to a relationship, commitment to a skill. Discipline is quite important. You might not want to do it, but it has to be done. And that is all I shall say about that. Moving on, lastly, to the film focus section. Welcome to the film focus section of this podcast. Today we shall be discussing certain habit practices within the film industry. Firstly, I'm going to explain more about the what's called the pipeline in movie production on next week's episode. But this is just going to give small bits from certain parts of the production process of a movie. So one of the creative habits that we have in the film world is story meetings. Story meetings is basically a part of the production process in which, and it happens quite often, like after every redraft of the story. But a story meeting is basically where all the main people working on a film tend to come together in a room and go through the script and the storyboards for the characters and basically the entire film, as they go through each step, refine, redo. That process is possibly on this pipeline. It's possibly the most reoccurring part of the film pipeline. Another habit that is built in the film industry or making process is collaboration. I feel the habit of collaboration is quite important because if your story artist and supervising animator have disagreements, your movie is done. Because the supervising animator is the one who basically determines how well the animation looks. And I'll be using animated movies as quite a large example in this section. So yeah, collaboration is quite important within the team. You cannot have writers and directors disagreeing, or editors and sculptors disagreeing, because it has to be, that's why it's a pipeline, it's connected. So I think having a habit of collaboration within your film company is quite important. Make sure your brief meetings are quite intense to be able to tell people, if you guys have beef with each other, make sure it does not interfere whatsoever with the production of this film. If you have beef with each other and you need to work together, just work together. You can sort your personal stuff out later. And then the habit of continuous improvement is my third point. We can take the example of Disney's shift from animated 2D animated films to 3D animated films. I feel like that was the biggest quote unquote improvement. There was nothing wrong with their 2D animation, but as time advanced, the 3D animation became almost necessary. They had to get into that space of 3D animation, which at the time only Pixar had done mainstream 3D animation with Toy Story and all the others. When Disney bought Pixar, it became easier for them to do so. We have The Incredibles, we have Cars, we have Big Hero 6, Moana, Tangled, and all the others. So that is continuous improvement. And again, something that will be discussed in the film pipeline episode in the future. This improvement is or has been quite major for these production companies, even outside of Disney itself. Um, and then the last point is a habit of balancing tradition and innovation. And unfortunately, that is not as easy as it was before, because what tradition would mean in this space is good and proper storytelling. In mainstream Hollywood, this is unfortunately rare to find. Some of the movies that we watch nowadays don't have a very captivating story in whatever way. The characters might be good and all that, but the story matters. It's story first, always. Even before you design the character, the script has to be done. And I think having a habit of balancing tradition and innovation, whereas I feel that nowadays, the more we advance in technology, unfortunately, in some spaces, unfortunately, major spaces, we tend to lose the tradition of good storytelling. And I feel that when establishing a film company or a media institute of any kind, I feel that what you're trying to convey to your audience should always come before whatever advancements you're planning on making to your creation process. And as I said before, unfortunately, that seems to be on a very rapid decline, especially in the mainstream Hollywood world, where we have good characters, good design, superb animation, but almost lackluster story. Whereas in 1960s and 70s, I'll use the example of Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood, and Disney's 101 Dalmatians. The story was simple yet captivating, but the animation was quite rough. If you look at some of the main characters, if you look at some scenes, if you look at the inanimate objects, you can see the sketch lines from the animator's paper. You can actually see it as the movie is playing on. You can see sketch lines, you can see some lines that overshoot here and there, but you're so focused on how captivating the story is, they don't even notice that they left a lot of sketchiness in there. Another one is Jungle Book. There's a lot of sketchiness. If you see when the characters are moving, you can see that there are certain lines that are popping out here and there, but you don't notice because it's a good story. You like Baloo and Bagheera and Shere Khan and Mowgli and all the others, King Louie and a lot, that you even forget about even the process. In fact, to be able to notice those mistakes, you'll have to actually look at the production process of some of these films. So I feel like balancing tradition and innovation is quite an important thing when you're making a film of any kind. Never lose the story element, and don't let the future in terms of innovation stop you from sticking to basically the idea of making the movie, which is to tell the story. And that will wrap it up for today. As mentioned in the first few seconds, there is a short video that I will upload on both Spotify and YouTube that will explain some very important updates concerning this podcast. The podcast will still continue to run. It will not affect the productivity of the podcast, but all details shall be explained in that section. I hope you got value out of this. Consider subscribing, sharing, liking, both on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. If you have any suggestions for future topics, I am open to hear them. Comment down below what you think or send me a DM on Instagram. All relevant links will be in the pinned comment, and we will see you in the next episode. Take care.